True Grit, 2010. I've always loved this movie. I've always loved the Coens, right? I've always loved their particular brand of nihilism, which is probably more could probably more accurately be described as like absurdism, but still, there's something extremely nihilistic about their films. Like True Grit in particular is definitely about the endless and timeless human struggle or crusade to make or do something meaningful and divine, uh, in spite of the meaningless, senseless nature of the universe. You know, meaningful creatures in a meaningless environment, or, I mean, more horrifyingly, the opposite. I think it's wild. So many of their films are kind of they blissfully entertain these moral quandaries of like take True Grit, an act that is wrong in and of itself, or an act that is wrong according to our laws and morals. I don't know. It's hard for me to speak right now because the end of True Grit did make me pretty emotional, actually. When when Maddie's being she's bit by the snake, and Rooster is like doing everything he can to get her uh, to a doctor, to a shelter, to someone who could help her. And like little Blackie is on its last legs, and Rooster has to ride that horse till it dies, and then Rooster carries Maddie the rest of the way, and then even he breaks down because he's old and he's withered and his ways are obsolete, and shoots his gun into the air, and like gladly someone comes out. But the part that made me emotional was when Maddie is like basically losing her sense of reality, losing consciousness quite literally, and has a vision of Tom Chaney, who she's already killed, getting away. And she even says, he's getting away. Because it's about that eternal struggle to make something meaningful, to have that meaningful moment. I hesitate to say cinematic moment because the Coens aren't necessarily interested in that. Um, it's more so just a meaningful moment. The cinema is how we kind of ascribe meaning to certain things. And that's why maybe now, in the postmodern sense, when we think of meaningful, we think of cinematic. But since this is set in the Old West, they really didn't. The Coens don't have that framework to work within, and they're really uninterested in entertaining or experimenting with those kinds of postmodern qualities, because this is a lot more of a nihilistic film. Because when she shoots Tom Chaney, um, you think that anyone would have a meaningful moment. Like when she shoots Tom Chaney, she doesn't get to. There's no exclamation point on it. There's no period because she falls back into a snake pit. Like there's no moment of meaningful validation or a cosmic retribution. There's nothing like that. She doesn't get to imbibe the moment with meaning because she's, like I said, like thrown into a no-win situation directly afterwards. Or even when LaBeef it like shoots Barry Pepper from like 400 yards away or whatever. He doesn't get to bask in any sort of glory, or that moment doesn't symbolize anything because he's just beaten over the head with a rock by Tom Chaney like a moment after. Rooster Cogburn seems pretty aware that everything is ultimately meaningless, but there's a lot of Camus in the Coen's work. I've always thought so. There's a lot of The Fall. There's a lot of Sisyphus, especially in this eternal struggle. And I love that this is like a remake, and it's not even a recontextualization because I think that would go against the Coen's own filmic philosophy. That it's an eternal struggle for a human to find meaning, to find retribution, an endless quest to feel to make retribution physical, or real in any sort of sense, and that'll never happen. We'll never have these moments of meaningful revelation. But the whole part about being human is to keep on that crusade, keep on that quest, keep on that bounty, that existentialist bounty, to try to feel something, try to make something meaningful of a situation. Um, Justice, in a lot of ways, conceptually tries to satisfy a trauma or a tragedy, but justice is just as a vagary. It's just a vague thing. Justice is not a meaningful thing. The Coens are wonderful nihilists, and this is a pretty wonderful movie. It's a comfort movie to me. Uh, it's not a movie I would call like underrated or underappreciated in the Coens catalog. It's just that movie that when you're talking about the Coens, you bring up Fargo, No Country for Old Men, Big Lebowski, like Oh Brother, possibly even Miller's Crossing or Blood Simple. This is the one that you bring up like way later, and you're like, and True Grit was good too. And they're like, oh yeah, yeah, I forgot. That's a good one. This one comes to mind immediately for me. It's one of my favorite Coen Brothers movies. It has the most rewatchability for me, which might sound sacrilegious to a lot of you out there. I would rather watch True Grit than like The Big Lebowski or Fargo, which seems to be the typical go-tos amongst cinephiles or anybody who enjoys movies. This one makes me happy. And this one, I think, is a really great distillation of their nihilistic principles. And this is long after they mastered that, right? It's long after they mastered it with No Country for Old Men, since it is derived from Cormac McCarthy. There's so much Faulkner in it, and Faulkner is a lot more pessimistic than I think the Coen brothers are. So like, I don't think No Country for Old Men is a really good it's a fantastic movie, phenomenal movie, but I don't think it's I wouldn't call it a terribly accurate representation of the Coens' nihilism. It's a great example of the reducto absurdum of Faulkner and McCarthy. It's a great example of that. But that's a much more pessimistic nihilism, whereas True Grit is like uh, it's a much better distillation, a representation of the Coens' very unique brand of offbeat nihilism, right? Um, it's a really lovely film, and I mean, talk about performances. Like first and foremost, Haley Steinfeld as Maddie completely steals the show. She was absolutely incredible, so engaging, so hilarious, so devoted to this crusade, so empathetic, so everything. She was phenomenal. Jeff Bridges, that's that's an amazing performance. Jeff Bridges is always amazing, though, but really here, especially taking on the role that John Wayne made so famous, and the one that John Wayne received the most acclaim for. Jeff Bridges assumes these characteristics wonderfully, and there's a lot of pathos in Jeff Bridges' performance. Matt Damon is probably the funniest one here, because there's something so awkwardly like stoic, or like there's something so performatively masculine about his performance. There's a lot of self-awareness to Matt Damon's performance here, and it's awesome. He's definitely the funniest one. They do to Matt Damon in this film what I think they accomplished with Brad Pitt in something like Burn After Reading. It's just surprisingly so funny, and I was really into it. Josh Brolin, now that's an undersung actor just in general, but here I love it. And I love it that the object, like th- almost like a biblical like object of, we must get Tom Chaney, he's a villain, we talk about him so much, and it builds up this like devil like in our minds of who he is. And I think that LaBeef and Maddie share this like same kind of vision of like Tom Chaney is this is this cretin, is this like almost demonic force, and we must put an end to him. And then when you actually spend time with Tom Chaney, which you only do for like maybe 10 to possibly 15 minutes, he is so cowardly. He is so uncool. He's not. He's very dull-witted. He's like pretty damn stupid and like petrified and just was just slimy. But he's not. He's not an opposing figure. He's not a very intimidating figure. He's just like a wounded, desperate, stupid animal. And Josh Brolin did that so well. Josh Brolin belongs in the Western, and I like that the Coens brought him back for when they did their neo Western with No Country for Old Men. I'm glad that they brought him back for a proper Western here. This film, like, nihilism can be an optimistic thing, and I think nihilism on film, or cinematic nihilism, it bleeds into postmodernism, and I think that they could be, while not typically sentimental, they could be tender experiences, like tender films that won't lie to you, films that are pretty genuine and authentic, films that won't tell you that everything has a huge meaning and that our lives are like the are made up of vibrancies and frequencies that we can all tune to, and we're together in some sort of fucking bullshit. I hate that shit. I hate like a unified existence. Here, especially within the genre of the Western, and within the Coen's interpretation of the Western genre, everyone is alone. Everyone is alone, but somehow these people are bound together by something that the Coens definitely hesitate to call fate. But their characters go out of their way to call it that. Maddie, in her introduction, are like, you pay for everything in life. Like nothing is free except for the grace of God or something. And that's very like heavily goes to what I'm saying. They'll, as human beings, we take a meaningless thing and we try to imbibe meaning in it because that's the only way we can stay sane in a world that doesn't care about our sanity. It's the only way we can stay sane in a universe that doesn't that is meaningless. That is absolutely otherwise meaningless. That we make it. If there is something fatalistic, if there's anything preordained or predetermined about this universe, we as people make it that way because that's the only way we can rationalize the chaotic randomness of this world, or the mundane viciousness of it. This is a great film, great filmmaking, great everything. I love this film. Um, a great example of the potential that the Western still has, and that we can still like kind of explore more themes within it. And it's not, like I said, it's not even about recontextualization or even deconstruction. There's nothing incredibly or particularly postmodern about this. Um, that sounds so weird. It's just a timeless genre that you can apply like fairy tale logic to it, or you can apply a Coen's esque nihilism to it. And I think the nihilism is still really relevant to our modern climate, to the current culture. I think that a kind of honest, I think that nihilism is honestly optimistic if you present it honestly. Because honestly, we're all just dying for meaning. And that kind of makes us appreciate the people around us more because we are apt to make those situations more meaningful and to make those people more meaningful in our memories of them. That's more optimistic than something contrived telling us that we have an inherent meaning, or something a lot more pessimistic than a Coen's film that would tell us that we're all meaningless no matter what we do. The Coens, like Maddie's experiences, the amount of meaning she put into that situation and onto Rooster Cogburn as a father figure, as still both LaBeef and Cogburn as stand-in father figures for her murdered father. Uh, just because it might not be meaningful in a cosmic sense, it's how she made meaning of her life or of her youth. And I think that that's just as physical are just as important as, let's just call it divine. If nihilism can have any divinity, it's a self-made truth or a self-made meaning, uh, kind of a self-generated one. After a while, meaning starts to generate itself, self-perpetuating in the best possible way. True Grit's a wonderful movie. Um, yeah, it's been a while since I just came on here and just like excessively gushed over a film, but I'm prepared to do that for this one. This one's really good. This one's really good. I haven't seen any sort of discourse about it, and I think it's a very necessary chapter in the Coen's filmography. Um, they're so comfortable making it. Like they are. Like I said, they've long mastered this style, so it's like it is watching a couple of masters just effortlessly make a fascinating and human statement uh, within the interiority, emotional or environmental landscape of of the West. Thanks for watching, and I'm your cult boyfriend.